To say that my first year was hard would be an understatement. It was the single hardest year of my life. So I just had to buck up and say, I need to do this for my family so that I can literally live. This business is difficult. There are moments when you say, hey, I'm going to make $250,000 on this deal, and it falls through. And so the mental game of land is really difficult, right? There's a lot of stuff in the land business is not all sunshine and rainbows. A lot of people will reach out to me on Twitter specifically or in general and say, hey, I'm going to quit my job and get in the land. And I said, do not do that. Don't do that. Build up enough reserves so that you can live and you have enough reserves in your land business. If you have to make decisions out of fear and you have to send me out of fear, your business is going to fizz out like a lot of land investors' businesses has fizzed out. The 5-year vision is more focused around how do I retire my parents, right? How do I help my wife's parents retire? How do I build a future for my son? If he looks at his father, he says, I'm proud of what this man did.
Hey, Clay, how's it going? Welcome to the show.
Seth, it is a pleasure to jump on the show. I know I said this to you in our email, which you were super organized, and it's really always a pleasure to work with people that are on top of their stuff. But you and I were briefly talking about this when we were pre-recording, and I remember a couple of things in my life that are like significant inflection points, right? And when you get older, it's really interesting. Like when you're younger, I'm sure you can recall, like you're in 3rd grade. And you're like between 3rd grade and 4th grade, and you're like 3rd grade summer, like that was incredible. And that like inflection point in your life is like a yearly thing. I'm going from 3rd grade to 4th grade, or I'm graduating high school, going to college. But as you get older, it sort of changes. Like inflection points are just not there. Like I'm a kid or I'm married. That might happen every half decade or decade. So what I've experienced is getting older is these inflection points become like more pronounced. And they're like really big shifts. And the inflection point, the reason why we're having this conversation, the reason why I was able to pay for my wedding last year, the reason why I was able to build a land flipping business and where I'm at today is literally because of the REtipster podcast. So I know I told you this when we originally met in Minnesota, right?
Yeah.
In the fall. But
that's amazing, man. Appreciate you saying that.
Absolutely. So in your depth for what you've done with the REtipster podcast.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's amazing to hear that. I mean, that's why I do this kind of thing. And most of the time, I don't really know who's listening and what's happening. And if they're getting results, I just don't really know until people tell me. So I'm really glad to hear that. And thanks for letting me know.
It's really interesting. Like you do a podcast or you post on social media because I'm very active on Twitter. And you might get like 100,000 impressions or 50,000 impressions. You're like, oh, it's just a number on a page. But on the other side of the page is someone staring at their phone or connecting or maybe learning about land investing for the first time, or maybe learning about a new topic in land investing for the first time. And so even though it might seem like, oh, I might even have 1,000 impressions, like if you were in front of an audience of 1,000 people or 500 people, you'd be like maybe shaking in your boots, right? And that's the impact that a podcast like this or social media, if you really share stuff, can really have on your life and someone else's life.
Yeah, for sure. What is your Twitter or X handle?
Yeah, I still call it Twitter, right? X handle is Clay Hepler. Yeah.
Clay Hepler, okay. Is it still Twitter? Does it still say twitter.com in the URL, or does it change to X now?
So here's a crazy thing. When I type it in, I type in Twitter, right? But it like auto reroutes, like old websites will like auto reroute you to the new URL, and it's actually X now.
Yeah.
But
yeah, X or Twitter or whatever you want to call it, I've never really understood it, but it sounds like you're really active there, right? That's like a big part of your business. How does it work? And like how beneficial is it to be active there? Like, have you seen a notable ROI from your time spent there?
I've seen a incredible ROI from my time spent there. One of my biggest investors actually that invest personally with in my business, as a deal funder. I actually found through there. He flew up. We played Top Golf.
Oh, cool.
It's like it invests a lot of money with me. So what's really great about Twitter is that you can really share valuable information, but you have to do it in such a way that's readable and digestible. And it's not like on Instagram or I would say Instagram and TikTok and a lot of these like shorts that you just digest information and they're really quick tip, short hits, and they're not really that valuable. But if you have a true well-written, well thought out Twitter thread, you can get so much value from that, right? And so I, on Twitter, literally will tell people, this is exactly what I might do in my business, and I'll break it down, and people get a lot of benefit from that. So I get a lot of impressions from that. I build a lot of connections from that, and actually give back value to the Lane community. And unlike, the Lane community is still a really small community, but unlike Instagram or TikTok or YouTube or whatever, it's still very much dominated by just maybe a couple of people that are actually actively talking on Twitter, because some people really like to write, right? Some people like to write versus like to get on podcasts or YouTubes or whatever. And so with Twitter, it's very beneficial in that way. People reach out to me all the time and say, hey, how can I get more involved? How can I learn from you? Like, in a more direct approach. And so it's just been so beneficial for me in my business just to share exactly what's going on.
Yeah. I may be wrong about this because, again, I'm not the Twitter expert, but it seems like X, I'll just call it X from now on to say the right word. Okay. But it seems like X is much more text-based, whereas like everything else, like YouTube and Instagram and all this other stuff, you got to like make videos or make really good images. But if you just are really good at putting well thought out thoughts into text format, it seems like that could win on X pretty well. There's a guy I know, I actually don't even know him at all, but his handle is Strip Mall Guy. And this guy puts incredible stuff out there. I mean, just amazing stuff that's worth paying for, like gold nuggets. Sounds pretty similar to what you do in terms of creating threads that get a lot of views and really deliver a lot of value.
What you can find is, in my opinion, it's easier to create a really attractive video, right? Like a video can be very attractive and very well kind of edited, and it makes it seem like it's actually more valuable than it is. But when it's a written word, it's a pulling of your thoughts and just putting them into someone who's a really good investor, like Strip Mall Trent. I know that, right? That the Mall Guy or whatever. Someone that's a really good investor can put together like a pithy tweet or a pithy thread, and you're like, I've never heard this put in this specific way before. Whereas with videos or Instagram, I find that more and more people lean on just churning out 15, 30, 60-second videos that are not actually quality. Again, that happens on X, of course, but the wheat is separated from the chaff, proverbially, on X, because it actually is difficult to put together good content if you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah, I wonder, is it the kind of thing where, like, say if you just have a long history of making posts that aren't that helpful, they're kind of worthless, and then all of a sudden, out of the blue, you put out just a value bomb. Does the algorithm kind of say, well, historically, your stuff hasn't been that good, so we're not going to let people see this because it's probably garbage too? Or can it actually recognize, hey, for whatever reason, there's an awesome post here. Let's let the world see it. Do you know anything about how that works?
I mean, the Twitter algorithm is a really interesting thing. And, there's sort of like two worlds that I think that, if you're starting on Twitter, right? So first thing, Seth, you could be like someone that like pisses a ton of people off, right? And so there's a guy that he's a very successful real estate investor, business owner, but he's very well known for posting controversial content. And he has like 300,000 followers, 400,000 followers at this point, because he will go after like the woke mob, social justice warriors. And then he that effectively like breeds the algorithm to get a lot of comments and likes and retweets and all that stuff. And then also it's sort of the value world, right? And so you can play both of those games. Like, I'm going to take a bunch of people off and be very controversial, which of course will get the comments, we'll get the likes, the retweets, or I can actually put together value bombs. But to answer your question about like, will the algorithm realize that and understand that? I don't really know. All I know is that I will have days, like I had a post this past week that had like 100,000 impressions, which is a lot, right? For my account, right? And then the next day I had a post that had 269 impressions. So I think that it really just matters how much you're actually interacting with other people's content, how much your value you're putting in your threads or your regular tweets, which builds sort of this compound effect of people seeing more of your content, right? But as you grow, as you get more followers and you get more engagement, right, then those smaller posts that might have had the 200 impressions might go up to 5,000 or 10,000 impressions, which will bring it'll kind of create this exponential effect with all your other content.
Yeah, I saw this presentation about a week ago from Jack Conti, I think is how you say his name. He's the founder of Patreon. He did this presentation at South by Southwest, but it was really fascinating. It kind of resonated with me as a content creator because it was all about how we're undergoing what he calls the death of the follower, which basically means 10 years ago on YouTube or Facebook or wherever you were active, it mattered a lot who you were friends with, who you were following, who you subscribed to. Like those sites would just show you that stuff because that's who you're connected with. And so they figure that's what you want to see. But as Facebook has started messing with their algorithm and as TikTok has become a thing where they've done a lot of experimentation with like, no, it doesn't matter who you're subscribed to. We're just going to show you what we think you're going to want to engage with based on other stuff that you've engaged with in the past. And we're sort of in this new world where like who you're subscribed to on YouTube or, whatever platform you're on doesn't actually have that much to do with what you'll end up seeing because these algorithms know so well now what you're going to click on and what you're going to want to stick around and watch. And things like controversy and just various things like that get a lot of attention and they retain attention and it works, unfortunately, I guess. So we're in this world where people, especially content creators, have this big push to try to make content for the algorithm rather than content that needs to be made for their audience in a way that sort of represents their art form. And I don't know if that's going to change anytime soon. I kind of think that is the new world that we're going to be in for a good long time because that's what's working and that's what's making money and ad revenue for these different platforms. So kind of makes me sad, but at the same time, like I kind of get it. Like I don't know why they wouldn't keep doing that if it's working for them.
Right. And I think that is sad, but also like it's just the reality of the world in which we're in. It's sort of like the land business now, right? Which is different than when you started, right? When it comes to Twitter or any social media, right? If you're posting, you have a purpose of posting. And so there's this great concept, which is created by this guy by the name of Kevin Kelly. I'm sure you've heard of it.
Yeah, I've heard of him.
1,000 true fans, right? If you have 1,000 true fans, right, and you have a course or you're looking for private investors or you're looking to build a community or whatever you're doing online or build a business, whatever the purpose of the content is, right? Because people don't just post content for no reason, right? Because it's hard work. And so if you focus on the person that you're actually trying to serve, like why am I posting on Twitter? Why am I doing this specific thing? And focusing on that person, whether you have 500 followers, 5,000, 50,000, 500,000, it really doesn't matter if you're achieving what you're trying to go for. And it's hard to compare yourself to someone maybe like I'm in the land niche, right? So I only talk about land. I don't talk about, controversial stuff, not talking about the Gaza, Hamas, Gaza, that whole thing or whatever it is, right? I don't talk about that stuff because frankly, it doesn't really occupy my mind space and I'm focusing on land. If I compare myself to an account maybe that has another decade of experience or like there's a bunch of accounts on Twitter that are just like general financial knowledge that have hundreds of thousands of followers. And I'm like, why don't I have hundreds of thousands of followers? Well, that's because hundreds of thousands of people aren't interested in what I'm talking about. And so I think that that's really important, like as you're building your audience online to kind of know who you're actually going after and really serving them well and say, what would I want to know if I was in their position or how could I provide content or value to them based on my understanding? And so that's what defines how I actually post on Twitter.
Well, now that we've kind of done a masterclass on social media and how to do that these days, why don't we kind of go back to the very beginning? So land investing. Tell me your story. How did you discover land investing? I guess you kind of already said that in the podcast, which is awesome. But like, when did this all happen? When and why did you decide to give this a shot? And what were you doing prior to that?
Yeah. So my background is, I could go really far back. Really far back is my goal in life at one point was to work for the State Department. And so I was working at the U.S. Embassy in Buenos Aires in Argentina and, doing some pseudo job work there. And that's what I thought I wanted to do, right? I thought I wanted to work in the foreign embassy. I speak Spanish and Portuguese, losing the Portuguese. And I speak German as well, but I'm losing that as well. It's like a muscle, you sort of lose it over time, right? And I did that and I really didn't like it. And so I ended up taking some time off college. It was extended, never went back, joined a family chocolate company and learned about sales and marketing. And then when I was doing that, like sort of taking the entrepreneurial path, I fell into real estate, right? Like, so most people, you fall into the hole of like the Grant Cardones of the world and the social media people that talk about real estate. And then I joined a company in my city, Seth, that was like buying like a mom and pop, got like 500 units. I was like, I want to learn about real estate. I'm going to go work for someone and learn along the right way, right? At that point, I was like, what would be interesting is if we could produce another revenue stream for this business, i.e. flipping and wholesaling. So I learned about wholesaling, flipping, built that business. First year, we did 75 flips and it was absolutely crazy.
Yeah, that's odd.
And at that point, that was like 3.5 years ago. And then I started buying my own rentals, doing the BRRRR method in my city. And I was buying rentals that were, 1900 vintage, 1920 vintage. As a Michigan guy, a lot of these buildings, man, they got the box gutters, they got the cast iron pipes, sewer pipes, plaster and lath walls. Like, they have boilers. And so you got to tear up the boilers to put in the ductwork and rip out the plaster and lath walls and lead-based paint and just houses that were built and they're sinking into the ground. And that's what I cut my teeth on. And I started to acquire a bunch of units. So we started BRRRing in, that would have been 2.5, 3 years ago. Started BRRRing while we were flipping. And when I say we, I mean my wife and I. And we acquired a portfolio of rental properties. But, what they don't tell you in bigger pockets, and this is going to be a theme, I'll talk about this, and I talk about this very openly. Like, real estate is hard. Land investing is hard too. Like, business is really hard. What might look like, hey, I have 85 units and I should be cash flowing 8,000, 9,000, 10,000 a month. I'm good. Well, what happens if a $40,000 sewer line breaks? What happens if you have to rip off your roof that's 4 stories up on your 10-unit apartment building? It has box gutters and it costs you $70,000. And so you might think you're making a lot of money in the rental property business, but the reason why there are tired landlords and why there's an absentee owner list that you can hit is because it's really, really hard, right? And so long story short, I'm building this rental portfolio and just getting my face kicked in, wholesale some stuff along the way, like a 28-unit apartment building. I was wholesaling a couple of apartment buildings and making enough money. And then Thanksgiving of 2022, the day before Thanksgiving, I get a call from my wife. And she's bawling. I mean, she's completely bawling. And when you get a call from someone in the middle of the day and they're bawling,
it's not good.
You're like, what happened? Is there a death in the family? Like, what's happening? And her company went under. So I was building a rental property portfolio. She had a really good salary. Okay. I was building this rental property portfolio. And I was saying, hey, Kara, this is a long-term goal. We're going to build this rental property portfolio. We're going to use your salary. We can go to banks. We could refinance. We had the private lenders. We had all this stuff lined up. And then we lost your job. And I had a wedding coming up that year. I had to pay for my life. We had these massive, telling you about plaster and lath, flipping over rental units. I mean, everything that could have gone wrong went really, really wrong very, very quickly. And so along that time period, I found the REtipster podcast. I joined education groups and I went all in on land. And so that's what brought me to land. But I mean, the first thing was looking up like how do I make money online? And I was like, I have the wholesaling house flipping experience, right? But I wanted to move to Colorado because at this point we had a house in Colorado, right? And so I'm in Pennsylvania, but I had a house in Colorado. And so I was like, we want to build a remote enabled business. This business has to be remote enabled. So was I going to build a virtual wholesaling company? Didn't really like how that worked. Didn't really like that wholesaling was sort of like bait and switch. It's like the whole point of wholesaling was, hey, I'm going to buy your property cash and then like sell it to someone else. And that like didn't align with me ethically. Even today, when we do double close, we straight up tell people we're going to list this thing on the market. But long story short, decided on land, went all in.
Yeah. So this was it mid 2022 or 2023 or when was this?
Basically what happened was learned about land in the fall of 2022 and joined the REtipster podcast and then went fully all in 2020, end of 2022, December. started to send some mail at that period.
Awesome. So like, tell me about this first year. I mean, coming from the house wholesaling world, I'm sure that probably helped a lot, right? I mean, first of all, you know what hard work is, you know what risk is. Like would you agree that that's a lot harder than land? Like, is that your opinion at this point?
It really depends now. Okay. So what I realized in the house wholesaling world, okay, even though there is more competition, there is higher intent. And so there exists on a motivation balance of land is higher margin, lower intent. Wholesaling is sort of higher intent, lower margin, more competition, right?
Yeah, what do you mean by intent when you say that?
So, perfect example. When you are working with someone in the house wholesale, there is an intent to sell. When I talk to someone that's recently someone recently passed away, there's a divorce, there's roof is leaking and it's going through, and your furnace, you have to replace your furnace and your roof, and you can't afford your mortgage or you have back taxes. There's higher intent to sell. And so when you
mean like motivation? Would that be another word?
Yeah. Motivation, right? So there's higher motivation to sell, right? So what that means is the sales process, although it's more competitive, the sales process is much easier in houses.
I can see that.
Because you are a solution to these people's problems, right? And so when someone comes in, they're a motivated lead, the cost to acquire the lead is essentially the same and maybe lower, right? Because there's a lot more ways and cheaper ways to get leads in wholesaling. But the motivation of the lead is so much higher. And so I don't know if I would say that land is necessarily like much less competitive, because there's also a ton of things now in the land space with marketing that is taboo and you could get sued. And so a lot of the ways that people were reaching prospects was very cheaply, texting, calling, ringing voicemails, etc. And those are gray areas. And so mail is sort of the only option if you want to be totally above the board. And that's very expensive. And so scaling a household wholesaling business on an expense basis is easier than scaling a land flipping.
Yeah. Would you say that the motivation or the intent, is that true both on the acquisition side for houses and the selling side? Like it's just easier all around?
My philosophy in the land flipping space is that, there are sort of like two things that you really need to focus on, right? If you're trying to build a 7-figure land flipping business, or if you're just trying to build like a multiple 6-figure land flipping business, you want to focus on market selection and acquisitions. I mean, everything else is kind of a moot point. You can tape together a rocket ship if you know how to find a good market and you know how to sell and close deals, right? Because a good market inherently creates demand on the back end. And if you know how to close deals and you build a good acquisition funnel, then you can effectively close the lower intent sale deals and bring in more revenue per mail that you send out, or higher return on your ad spend. I don't know where I'm right now. You asked a question and I kind of forgot what your question was.
Yeah.
Do you mind re-asking it?
No, it's, well, your comment a minute ago about how direct mail is the main way to do it and make sure you're above board. So does that mean direct mail is your main way of finding deals right now? Or are you using something else?
Based on TCPA compliance laws. Okay. If you are texting a business, an LLC, you do not need opt-in consent, period. So you can text LLCs, you can call them, you can do whatever you want, because the TCPA, and those who don't know about TCPA, is the Telecommunication Consumer Protection Act, and it protects consumers from unsolicited outbound marketing, like cold calling or texting or ringing voicemails or whatever. But businesses are not under that umbrella. So you can text businesses all day, RVM businesses all day, and obviously consult with an attorney, but you're fine in that way.
When you skip trace these people, like skip trace an LLC, aren't some of the phone numbers that you get through that the owner's personal phone number? Or is it only the...
Yeah. I'm not an attorney, so talk to your attorney about this, right? Like, this is not legal advice at all. But, technically, because it's a business-to-business transaction, of course, there's a human involved. But because it's a business-to-business transaction, you can do, this is what I understand, right? You can solicit directly.
Okay.
How does this work? If you're going after self-storage deals, you can cold call people in the self-storage industry all day of the week, right? If you're, for example, a cold caller and you don't even, it doesn't fall underneath the TCPA, right? Again, check with your attorney. This is all of things that I've heard. So I do a lot of direct mail. In other words, I market in other ways as well. I will text sometimes. I've done some cold calling campaigns, but it's mainly direct mail in my business.
What is your response and acceptance rate been on direct mail? And I just ask because I know, direct mail, I feel like it's harder now than it's ever been for land investors, just in terms of response rates being lower. People who are doing well at it, from what I've seen, is because they're doing something different in terms of like maybe they're whittling their list down in a different way, or maybe their template looks different or just says something different altogether. So I guess, first of all, how well is it working for you? And if it's working well, what's your secret? How are you doing that?
Yeah, so I'm going to drop an absolute bomb right now.
Okay,
so
sweet.
I was on the call the other day with a seller. One of my acquisition guys said, "Hey, Clay, can you get on this call to close this guy?" Right. So I like to get back in the seat sometimes too. I get on the call with this seller. He's basically questioning our credibility, right? So of course, a seller to question credibility. That's really one of the four things that they're going to question, right? They're going to have a discomfort with credibility, trusting us, because there are a lot of scams, and obviously the majority of our seller archetypes are older. So he's questioning our credibility, he's questioning our trust. And he said, "Well, you're one of the 5,000 letters that I've gotten from Sanford, North Carolina." I said, "Huh?" Because a lot of people use virtual mailboxes in the land.
Oh, yeah.
Right? I said, "Huh, that's really interesting." He's like, "Yeah, I just get everyone sends me letters from Sanford, North Carolina."
That's interesting. That's where traveling mailbox is, right? If I remember right.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, we don't live there. That's like a virtual mailbox, and I'm very transparent with people about in the process. What that caused me to do is I changed on different mailers. I will change the mailbox, where the mailbox is located, right? And so when I change where the mailbox is located, I have to be very aware there are two massive political parties in the United States, red, blue. And if someone in a rural South Carolina gets a mail from California, what are they going to think? I'll let you decide, right? And so our mailboxes that we have, our virtual mailboxes, are in states that are very neutral, right? And so you can look up, this is what we did. We looked up the top cities that has sort of the best reputation nationally of people. And we tried to find mailboxes that were in those cities. So if you get something from Las Vegas, for example, right, that's one of the ones that we use. Like, people are going to be like, it's very neutral. Like, when you hear Las Vegas, you're like, gambling, good time, good food, maybe. Like, I mean, there's a lot of stuff, but there's never like, those Californians, they have the 13% income tax, right? Or a negative connotation. There's no real connotations. For some people there might, but on a national scale, there's little. So we do those things to differentiate ourselves. We do things with changing out like who's the sender. We do things with changing out where we're sending it from, and try to differentiate ourselves. But here's one thing that I would give to the audience as another sort of nugget of thinking about direct mail. What matters is that you send it. It's not whether you try to make it super fancy or make it a yellow envelope versus a white envelope. If you get lost in the details, it's going to really prevent you from sending out enough mail to even be able to make a good enough investment decision on whether or not your mail is working to the best extent possible. So that's the first step.
When I hear that, I totally get that. And I feel like it used to be that simple, like truly. But like I've heard more than one story from people sending out 20,000 mailers and getting nothing, or 100,000 mailers and getting one deal from it. Just like to the point where it's like, it almost doesn't work. Like it does matter that something is special or done very right about the list or about the mailer or something. Like, you can't just mindlessly just spray and pray. And so I'm wondering, beyond just sending out the mail, like, is there anything else, I guess beyond the return address, or like, is there, are you doing blind offers or neutral letters, or how are you approaching that?
Right. So when it comes to blind offers, it depends on the person who is receiving or sending out the mail, right? If you're sending a blind offer, the reason why I think they worked historically was because they were a solicitation of intent. I would sell it for $54,000 or whatever. And so I'm going to call this person back because they gave me an offer. But everyone sends an offer within this specific range. What is the usability of that? It's not really that helpful, right? Because why we're sending a blind offer is because we want the person to call us back. So I will do range offers and also neutral offers. But I have a sales machine that can manage a lot of people calling in with neutral offers. So I would say it depends on where you are in your business, whether you should send blind, range, or neutral. But really, when we're thinking about building a direct mail campaign in general, we have to think about what would make the right person call me back. And also, what can my acquisitions machine handle? So if I get a lot of low intent sellers at this point in my business, maybe I'm early on, and I actually only need high intent sellers on a relative basis because I don't have the bandwidth to manage and bring these low intent sellers through a long sales process. So in 8 months or 10 months or 2 years, I can call them back and I can close them. And so those are all sort of factors that you have to think about when putting together a direct mail campaign. And then also think about what is everyone else doing? Like if you just download a blind offer sheet on the internet, like do you really think that another 1,000 people are doing the same exact one?
Yeah, for sure. I think you mentioned recently you got some $200,000 deal or something like that. So like, what does it take to get a deal like that? Just in general, like how many deals are you getting per X number of mails you're sending out?
Okay, so that is a hard question to answer because we're constantly changing the target criteria. And in our target criteria in terms of the markets that we actually go in, like for example, we are only going to look at an acreage rating that's selling at above 50,000. So when I'm looking at a market, I'm going to look Seth and say, hey, if 5 acres are selling for 10,000 an acre, then I'll target 5 acres. But if it's 10 acres that are selling for 5,000 acres on a county-wide basis, I will target that county and I will target 10 acres plus. So on that level, that's how we actually target our markets and target the areas that we're going to focus on. And so for a larger deal like that, honestly, I'm seeing that it's depending on the state, it's going to be 7,000 mailers, 8,000 mailers, right? To get a big deal like that. But it's still a great ROI.
Have you ever gone after like smaller, like, I don't know, sub $10,000 deals? Or has that never been something you've even messed with? Never. Okay. And I guess when you talk about the sales machine that you have, so what does that mean? Are you talking about a certain number of people that are doing certain things? Or is this like an amount of money that you have to spend to buy these properties? And did this sales machine exist from your house wholesaling days? Or is this something you built up when you got into land?
So it's built upon that experience, right? Because wholesaling and flipping is a decade ahead at this point, right? Maybe 5 years at this point, because a lot of land investors have gone to the masterminds and brought it into the space. But really, it's about when we have a lead that comes through our system, how do we get them to a hell yes or a hell no as soon as possible? And that's sort of the philosophy of our sales process, right? So there was this Harvard Business Review study that found that if you respond to leads within 5 minutes, you have a 377% increase in conversions. That means we prioritize speed to lead. That is the top metric that we focus on. When a lead comes in, we got to call that lead quickly. We track it. We track it every single week and make sure that we're reducing our speed to lead during our business hours.
Sorry, right? How fast did you say? How many minutes?
Within 5 minutes,
Man, that's fast. So like, do you literally have somebody around the clock, like 24/7 just waiting at the phone to call these people?
Not 24/7, but during the day, we sort of have different lead statuses. And when a lead comes in, we know that we need to prioritize these lead statuses. So we have two sort of buckets of people in our business, right? We have our lead managers and our acquisition manager. This is a very common setter closer model. So we have our setters and our closers monitoring our inbox for when leads call in, that they call that lead right away. And during the day, they're on that screen. You know, every one of my team members has 2 screens. I will buy them another monitor if they come on my team, because the effectiveness of a salesperson when they have 2 screens is like double or triple, right? So every time I tell them, this is exactly how you need to run your day-to-day as a salesperson in my organization, right? In order to optimize your productivity and efficiency and allow you to get the most amount of commissions possible. Well, I'm like, at any point, you got to be monitoring that inbox. That inbox is like a religion. We need to make sure that we are following it and we are making sure we're refreshing our page and everyone is on it at all times. It is unacceptable for any lead to come in and be more than 30 minutes untouched during business hours. It's completely unacceptable.
No, I believe it. I can tell you, the last realtor I worked with, I got to say it was within about 5 minutes-ish of me submitting their little web form online, and it says something. Just the speed to respond. It's like if somebody takes like a day or 2 or 3 to get back to me, they're basically saying you're not that important to me. And if they respond immediately, they're saying that, you're very important. And it's almost like a separate thing from the price, from everything else. Like just that quick response, it goes a long way in terms of just communicating like you matter. And that it just instantly kind of tees things up to go a lot better if you can tell a person that you matter from the outset like that.
And in addition to that, when someone calls in or reaches out to a business, like imagine, like, for example, it's the day before Christmas and your furnace goes out, right? And you're in Michigan, so you're cold as hell.
Yeah, it's
right. You're freezing. You're going to call a HVAC company. And if that HVAC company picks up, you're going to be like, this is a great HVAC company. If they don't pick up, you're going to call another one. If they don't pick up, you're going to call another one. And if one calls you back in 5 minutes versus 20 minutes versus 2 hours, your experience with that company and your trust in their ability to deliver value to you, even if you're paying more, or in this case, you're accepting a lower offer, you're going to have more credibility and trust with that person. So that's exactly the philosophy that we have. When someone calls into our business, we want to get on the phone with them as quickly as possible. We want to say, we want to get this person to a hell yes or a hell no, because the longer that they're in our pipeline, clogging our pipeline, the less amount of attention that we can put to other leads that are calling in. So we want to get them to, is this person interested? If they are, let's get them an offer. We get them an offer the same day or whatever it is, so that we can unclog our pipeline and convert more deals and get more deals, under contract and sold.
Yeah, for sure. So since you started this business, how have things evolved? Like, what did your first year look like in terms of like how many deals you did and the sizes of those deals and just the way that you handle things in general to how they work now? Like, are you doing more or less volume or going after the same kinds of deals, or what changes have you made and why have you made those changes? Like, what lessons caused you to make the changes that you have?
Well, if I were to go back to myself when I started, I would have slapped myself a couple of times and said,
I think we all would.
So, last year, the fact is, I was building this plane when it was on the way down in the most competitive market that land investors have ever seen by far, right? Last year, there were more people getting into the business than there ever has been. The economy was humming along and there was so much competition, and sellers knew that their properties were worth a lot of value. I think that that's been adjusted this year, at least in my experience. And so I was getting into the market during the most competitive time. And so I sent out a bunch of mailers. I was pricing everything. I was doing literally everything. So at the beginning of the year, I was sending out a bunch of mailers. I was calling agents. Like through the Pat Live thing, people go on the Pat Live, I convert them. And I was building the basis of this process. Halfway through the year, Seth, I started to implement other marketing channels. I started to implement texting and cold calling. And I had a lot of success with texting. Brought my first VAs on. And I had not that great of success with cold calling. So I kept texting through the summer and I just stopped mail, which was so stupid, right? Because mail is like this compound vehicle. Over time, people get your letters. They might get another letter and then they'll call you back in a year, right? It's happening to us this year. And so I just kept texting last year. And then in the fall, added some other channels, ringless voicemail, and kept texting. And then the 10 DLC thing happened last fall and just knocked me for one. And then I started mailing again. And then this year, we're texting a lot. We're sending about 60 to 70,000 pieces of direct mail a month. And so it's a lot of volume.
Yeah,
right?
It's huge.
And so last year, in terms of deals per month, we were doing anywhere between 2 to 6 at the beginning, middle, end of the year. It was kind of on the higher end. Can't really recall the exact number, but, it ended up doing over 50 deals in our first year, right? Which was a really good feeling, right? And so this year, the way that we've adjusted is we have gone back to the bread and butter, right? So going after parcels on different acreage increments, and we're hitting literally everything. Everything from 2 acres to 250 acres, and we're hitting them direct mail. We're doing some texting. We're doing some calling. And at this point, we're over 10 deals a month average. In some months we're 15, some months we're kind of in that range.
So with all these different marketing channels you're using, do you have like a default, like we always start with direct mail. If they don't respond to that, then we send them a text or then we do this next. Like, is there a certain sequence that everybody goes through or is it just kind of changed throughout the year based on how you're feeling that day?
Yeah. So we are texting people first in most cases, but we're still like every month doing direct mail, no matter what, because it's just so reliable. Every single month we're doing direct mail. So it's sort of, at this point, we're changing up our marketing, trying to be a little creative with things. But I mean, we're consistently getting out marketing every single month. There's no real sequence behind, I need to text this person 3 times and then send them a piece of direct mail. It's just filling out markets and figuring, hey, what are our internal metrics that are really telling us that we need to hit this market in a couple of different ways. But I am of the philosophy that if you pick a market, you're in it for the long haul, at least a year. So we hit markets, every market we're in, at least 4 times a year.
Yeah. Now, when you say direct mail is so reliable, do you mean that it's bringing you the most deals, or is it because it consistently works, or does it return on ad spend the best with that, or what do you mean by reliable?
I think that the return on ad spend for texting is probably higher. I think that direct mail, it's just expensive. But when I say consistent, I mean people are calling us with direct mail. We're getting deals locked up. It's consistent.
Could that be because you're sending out so much of it? Like the grass is greener where you water it type of thing?
I absolutely believe that.
Okay.
I absolutely believe that.
So then it's really not that much better. You're just spending more money on that. Or am I wrong?
On a relative basis, we're seeing a return on investment of about 6x on our direct mail at this point, which is like pretty good with direct. And we got some larger deals that are closing. So it's going to go through the roof with that. But business is very simple. You send out enough pieces of mail in a way that's going to solicit someone in such a way that they're going to call you back, and you have a good enough acquisitions machine, then you're going to make money.
Now, I'm curious, with these deals that you're doing, are you doing anything to them before you resell them? Like, are you subdividing or doing entitlements or cleaning them up or anything? Or is it just buy, do nothing, and then sell for more? What's your strategy?
So we're going to look at the best way for us to optimize value in whatever market that we're in such a way that it's not going to give us a big... We're looking at ROI and we're looking at ROH, return on investment and return on hassle. Can be too difficult to execute, but if it's difficult to execute, it's got to be worth the squeeze, right? For example, we're buying this 10-acre parcel in Arkansas, right? And we cut it in half. We sell for $10,000 an acre, or we sell it at $12,000 an acre. If we just sell it at 10 acres, we might sell it at $7,500 or $8,000 an acre. That's worth it for me. So I pay for a survey and I put a perk test on both the lots, and I make $4,000 an acre more. That's a really good investment. So it's really just a case by case basis. We are going to be getting into entitlements soon, but that's a market that is a totally different beast. And if you want to get really good at entitlements, you got to really know the markets and know the buyers that are actually in those markets so that you can provide a product that they're looking for.
So my next question here, before I even ask it, I'll just say, I don't even know how I would answer this, but I'm just curious. You mentioned the return on investment and the return on hassle, which I love that. I'm just wondering, how do you weigh that? Like, what if the ROI is amazing, but the ROH is just huge? And like, even though the ROI would be amazing, you don't want the hassle. Like, at what point do you default to, no, we care more about the hassle versus the ROI? Is there any way? I mean, maybe it's just a gut feeling when you look at it. And sometimes you don't really even know that hassle until you start trying to do it. And then you realize, wow, this is a huge hassle. But do you prioritize ROI or ROH if it comes down to the line and there's sort of, you have to make a decision one way or another?
If you have imagine you're drawing a piece of paper, you have ROI on one end and ROH, and they're sort of on the same line, right? If you have a tie in between them, you're like, oh man, I'm not really sure. The way that I think about it in my business is the cash conversion cycle of this deal. Okay. The reason why the land business historically has been very attractive is because you're able to flip these parcels very, very quickly. And so if I want to take on a very big project that's going to have a lot of hassle all in the project, in terms of like, this is going to be a project that is going to require a lot more of my time that I would have to take out of the core processes of my business, whatever it is, Seth. I'm going to think about the cash conversion cycle of the investment, of my money that I'm actually putting into this parcel. What does that mean? Every single month we update. How long is it taking us to sell all of our parcels? What's our cash conversion cycle? So we can accurately predict if we send out marketing on today, how long is it going to take for that marketing to come in? So we know how much to spend every single month on our marketing. If our return on hassle is such that our cash conversion cycle on this deal is going to be, it's going to take 2 years, it's going to screw up our cash conversion cycle and it's going to tie up a lot of our money, then we'll just say no. Maybe try to wholesale it, find someone else that could take it over, double close on it. But we're always thinking about our cash conversion cycle, because even if I make $500,000, okay, on this deal, for example, it takes me 2 years to make $500,000. But if I allocate that money elsewhere and I make $400,000 or $350,000, but I'm able to turn my money quicker in a more reliable manner, then I'm going to take that every single time. So cash conversion cycle of our marketing cash is what really dictates our decisions, whether or not we're going to invest in something like that.
How do you know how quick that's going to happen, though? I mean, maybe if it's a market you've worked before with a property type you worked before, that would give you a good indication. Or maybe just looking at days on market on Zillow would be another way. But sometimes, you just don't know until you get into it. This will probably work, but I don't know. We just got to try it. Do you have a reliable way to estimate that, or do you ever estimate that and end up being wrong?
That's the $1 million question, right, Seth? I don't think that it's an estimate. Just like when you estimate, if you're buying an apartment building, you're saying, hey, I'm going to put granite countertops in and repost gray paint and some LVP flooring. This is how long I think it's going to take for me to recoup my investment and increase the NOI by X. It's the same exact thing here. It's totally projected. So, we're going to gather days on market data. And it's going to be a gut decision, period. And I tend to be more prudent because those are the projects that sink people. And I have a 8-week-old kid, and that's my priority right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It makes me wonder, when you compare the land business to the house business, when you think about the stress involved, the amount of money you can make, how well you sleep at night, your hope for the future, all these things. I mean, do you think that land is better than houses? Is there ever anything that you miss about the house world where you wish land would work like that? How do you compare the two?
I think that the opportunity vehicle of land is 10x the opportunity vehicle of a house flipping business, right? Why? Because if you build a marketing machine in land, you can literally do anything. You can be like Seth Williams and build up a ground up self-storage development, right? You can re-entitle a property in 10x the value. You can, build a marketing machine and buy a really cool hunting tract in the middle of nowhere, and it's your homestead that you've been looking for forever. I think that the land business is a much better opportunity vehicle for someone to get to a higher net worth quicker. So 10 out of 10 would say that land is a better business to be in.
With that said, is there anything you like more about the house business? Is it just that motivation all around, or the intent? Is that the main thing? Or is there anything else about houses where you're like, man, I wish land worked like that? Maybe finding comps?
I would, right. You would probably be able to know this better than I would, right? So I think comps is a big one, right? Comparables is big. But actually, I like that because it makes it more a less efficient market.
Yeah.
So if you want to scale a house flipping business, you can take the model that you're using, which is PPC, Facebook ads, direct mail if you're using inbound marketing channels, or radio ads or TV ads. And I could say, hey, I'm in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and I'm going to go to Detroit, and then I'm going to go to Petoskey. You didn't know I knew some Michigan.
Yeah, man, you're good. You been here before?
No. And you can take that same model and apply to different cities, and you can be successful in those different cities. In land, the fact is you can build a reliable $500,000 a year business off direct mail, and the complications of that are not super difficult. But if you want to scale, you just have to set out a lot more mail, because PPC, in my experience, does not work super well, because PPC is for high intent sellers. And so you get rural infill lots in middle of nowhere, Arkansas, that you buy for 2,000 and sell for 4, and that's not my game. And so I think that the scalability at that level, which is I think from like 1 to 5 million, I would say house wholesaling wins, or maybe 1 to 3 million, and then 3 million plus land wins. So at the beginning, land wins. In the middle, house wholesaling wins. If you want to go really, really big, $3-5 million a year business, I think that land wins because you have so many more tools in your tool belt, like subdividing and entitlements and developments that you can employ to get to multiple 7 figures or 8 figures.
We've kind of talked a little bit about this, but is there anything unique about the way you're running your business that other land investors aren't doing? Like, or maybe even looking at yourself personally, when you consider the things that you're good at, do you have anything that you would say is an unfair advantage, like something you or your business can do well or different that others can't do or just won't do?
Okay, so there's a cartoonist. His name is Scott Adams. He's a controversial figure, I think. He created Dilbert. Dilbert is a cartoon that is very, very popular on a national scale. And the guy's made a really, really good living doing what he's doing because he's good at storytelling and he's a decent enough artist, right? And so he has this really, really interesting concept that if you are top 10% in 2 or 3 skills in the world, you can be an industry shaker. You can build a crazy successful business. And I applied that same thinking to the land business. There are so many things that you can focus on in the land business. There are just so many things that are important. Am I going to send this direct mail piece? Am I going to do this? Am I going to do this? Am I going to do this? There are 2 things that matter. And I only focus on these 2 things: market selection, sales. If you pick a good enough market, you can send out a bunch of bad mail, right? And you might get 1 or 2 deals, but your sales machine is good enough that you can convert the deals, and you pick a good enough market so it sells quickly. So you have a high cash conversion cycle. So even though you might get a lower return on your investment, you can scale quicker and have a better, more predictable business because your cash is turning quicker. I'll give you an example of this, Seth. If you and I are picking different markets, okay, and we have the same amount of money at the beginning of the year, and I find a really good market and have a really good sales and marketing machine. So I find a bunch of good markets. You and I pick 25 markets apiece. You focus all your energy on your marketing. Hey, I'm going to build this awesome direct mail piece. It's going to be Seth's direct mail piece. It's going to be so, so good. And you sent out a bunch of direct mail. I sent out a bunch of direct mail. I picked the right markets though. And you might get 4 deals in your first mailer. And I might get 2 deals or 1 deal in my first mail. But I, because of my sales machine, can, over the period of a year, I can re-enroll these people. I can get back and talk to them again, and I can convert them through good sales. So that initial marketing, you might have gotten 4 people in your first marketing, right? Say there's a ton of mailers. I might have gotten 1, but throughout the year, I might have gotten 5 people because my sales and marketing process is so good. Let's use the same example. When you get those 4 parcels under contract, it takes you a year to sell it, okay? In month 1, I get the first one under contract. I sell it in month 3. Month 3, I get the 3 under contract, and I sell them in 2 months. And my money, even though you might have beaten me in terms of the marketing, getting those deals under contract, I win over a period of time. I make more money in my business. My business scales faster because I have those 2 things that really matter, which is market selection and sales. So I wouldn't say I'm like special. I would say that I focus on the most important things. We're ruthless and relentless about perfecting things like speed to lead, market selection. And that's why I've been able to scale the business to the extent that I've been able to scale it. And we're continually to be successful is because those are the things that actually matter.
So 2 big questions out of there. You talk about finding a good enough market and then having a really good sales machine or sales team. So just to recap what I think I heard you say, correct me if I'm wrong, but on the sales side of things, the way you can have this amazing sales machine is to reply really quickly, consistently follow up with people, and have maybe good phone skills so that when you're actually having these conversations with people, you can more effectively close deals. Is that most of it, or is that I'm missing anything?
I mean, there's a lot there, but I would say that those are some high level things that are really, really important, right?
Yeah, and I did a whole 3 video series with Ajay Sharma where he talks specifically about his sales team and their sales process and everything they go through. It may or may not be similar to what you do, Clay, but anybody out there who's interested, I'll include a link in the show notes where you can check out that, because I think there's a ton of insight in if you're trying to figure out like, how do I create this good sales team that follows up quickly and consistently and says the right things. He explains a lot of that. So that's one thing to check out. But back to the thing about the good enough market, a place where I can send bad mail and still get deals. So how do I find these places? Like how would you qualify or quantify a market and be like, yes, that is a good market. I can send terrible mail there and I'm going to get deals from it. Like, what does that look like?
I don't know if I would say like, maybe I was being a little hyperbolic, right? But
I might be exaggerating what you said too.
So. Right. What matters is you pick the markets that sell quickly. You and I know of the land investors who send mail to desert squares and they get a very high response rate. They don't seem to have issues with their response rates, right? They have high intent sellers. They don't need to have a good sales process. But no one wants to buy it on the back end. So they have the owner finance it to sell it. That's the example of the opposite of what I'm talking about, right? So it's more competitive to get in because it's a faster moving market, right? When you get a property there, it's like a gold mine. And when you build relationships with these sellers over time, essentially you're able to convert them over a period of 12 to 24 months, right? And so that's what I was talking about when I say you have good market selection. And really what it comes down to is how quickly are parcels selling in those markets, period.
Yeah. And I know market selection is a huge topic, and a lot of people spend a lot of time trying to perfect this. And I totally get why, because it's a big part of this process. But I'm wondering, when you find these markets where things are selling quickly and it's more competitive to get in, could it ever be possible that a market is selling too quickly or it's too competitive to get in? Like, I know I've got a whole video on figuring out the sell-through rate or the sold to for sale ratio, just looking at data from Zillow and Redfin and that kind of thing. This is what a lot of people do. Like, is that what you do as well? And is there like a certain ratio at which, wow, this market is way too hot, like we shouldn't even try?
I would say it depends, period. And what I mean by that is like, what are you going after? What's the property type that you're going after? So if you're going after a certain type of infill lot, right, it's going to be more competitive. But in a major metro area, it's going to be more competitive. So it really depends on what, number one, how much money you have, and number two, how long you have to wait, and what return on investment you need to get, right? And so there's a lot of factors that go into how you should target a market. But of course, if it's a more competitive market, you're going to have a lower response rate. So how do you adjust for that? Well, you might have to go after bigger parcels. You might have to have a market intelligence in the specific market that you know that you have a guy that I go after infill lots in this specific area, and I know a guy that buys them for 25% above market value because he puts modular homes on them. I mean, when you get on that level and it's a very competitive market, there has to be additional value adds that you have. So this is it's like, the analogy of turtles on turtles on turtles on turtles, turtles all the way down. It's like that exact same thing in market selection, because we need to know what skill sets do we have, what can we add to the market. I can attack a more competitive market if I have a specific set of skills that would enable me to optimize the leads that come through my funnel.
So hypothetically, let's say we know we're going after properties between 10 and 20 acres. We want the value range to be $50,000 to $200,000. Like, we have all this stuff figured out. We know exactly what we're trying to do, but maybe it's a new market. We don't have builders waiting to buy stuff that we know we can go to. So there's going to be a little bit of guessing involved in terms of how long it might take to sell. So in that scenario, like, what would the sold to for sale ratio need to be? Like, would you want to see, for all the properties currently listed on the market, 2 have sold over the past year? Or like, I don't know, what specific metrics would you be looking at to say, okay, it's officially too competitive now, we can't do it because of this? Or is it not really that clear defined?
I would say that if you're targeting those types of markets that are much more competitive, right? You have the for sale to sold ratio is out of whack, right? Then you have to, at that point, do different things to attract your sellers. The perfect example is if you're targeting, there's 15 of these specific types of parcels in the county, and you know that you're going to have a really high ROI on it. Say it's an entitlement deal, right? Or steps you're looking to develop another self-storage facility, maybe not ever in your life, like you need to. And so you have to then at that point focus on, how do I approach this person with a different type of marketing? Again, as we dissect the market selection, this can go for hours, right? We can talk about after at a certain level, then you have to make a decision. Do I have to spend more time then focusing on the marketing?
Well, and that's another thing about market selection is like this whole analysis paralysis thing is very real. And I'm wondering, how much time do you spend evaluating stuff? Like if it's a totally new market, you've never been there before, like how much time would you spend on it? I mean, what is the real information you have to know before it's just like, hey, I can't figure out anything more until I just try it and see what happens. Like how deep do you go on that before you just start moving?
That's a great question. I am more of a ready, fire, aim guy. I will look at a market, try to focus on the pockets that are the most attractive in terms of the most comps that I could put together an offer for, or just say, I think this is a good enough market. I'm going to send a test mailer and then just go into it. I at that level, it's very nuanced. And so I tend not to spend, after I say I'm committed to these 10 markets, I tend not to spend a disproportionate amount of time questioning myself. It depends on, again, what type of market am I doing? Am I doing blind offers? Am I doing range offers? It's neutral. It doesn't really matter as much, right? Because if I pick the right market, I just send it, right? And then if you want to make it more complicated, you do the blind offer. And then that becomes more complicated. You say, how do I test my pricing, etc.
I mean, maybe if we, I don't want to belabor this too much, but maybe if you think back to 1 or 2 or 3 deals you did where it went really well. So in that case, like what did you look at in that market to be like, okay, I looked at these things, I saw these results, then I took this action. I sent out neutral letters or something, and then this result came back. Can you think of any examples where it's like this is literally what I did and it worked for me? I probably could have asked you this before we got on the interview because I'm sure this takes time to recall and think this kind of thing through.
No, it's not a problem at all. It's not a problem at all. So
you don't have to say what the market is, by the way.
I'm not going to say market because I'm going to hit it again. So I hired this data analyst that he's a really smart guy. And we came up with, I'm just giving away the playbook right now. We came up with what we call zip code clusters. So in a county, you might have 10 zip codes or 7 zip codes or whatever, right? And different zip codes in different areas. So let's just say, this county, it's just a square county, right? It's easy. It's a square county. If people watch this on YouTube, but you have a square county and then you have a zip code at the top. And if you just say you have 8 zip codes and they're sort of, as zip codes are, they're blended in different areas and there's a mountain range in the middle and then there's a lake in the top right hand corner. You're like, how the heck do I price this? The top area, the top zip code and the bottom zip code might have a similar type of geographical feature. And so we can cluster those together and put together pricing on similar geographical features. Now, I'm not actually saying like do a satellite view and like fly over the county. That feels like overkill to me. But what I am saying is, there are tendencies for certain prices to be around the same, like, oh, this is 10,000 acre in this zip code, and this is 10,000 acre in this zip code, and this is 9,000 here. And we can all pull those together and use, those are like homogeneous pricing based on what we believe to be a homogeneous geographical area. And so we just cluster the zip codes and we just send, maybe there's 3 or 4 different zip code pricings. And then on the highest level, we'll do a county-wide pricing. For the zip codes that don't necessarily sit within the homogeneous pricing, let's say there's 3 A, B, C, we'll do a county-wide zip code pricing as well.
Okay, gotcha. And for those out there listening who might not know, homogeneous pricing just means the pricing is similar for, in the same general ballpark. Okay, so looking back at your experience in land so far, what would you say has been the hardest part of this for you? Like, what were your biggest challenges and struggles when you got started, and what are they now? Is there ever anything where you're just like, oh, I hate this part of the business? Anything come to mind, or not really?
I hate market selection, right? To be honest with you.
I hate this conversation.
Like the overhead in your business. Clay, if you could do one thing, what would you do? Sales. what do you do in your land business? I do market selection. I do coaching. I do leadership. Don't really do sales, right? So market selection's hard. Here's what I would say in terms of like when I started, what was difficult. I took a couple of courses and they left a lot to be desired. And especially during the competitive market that we're currently in, it felt like they were built for 5 years ago.
Oh yeah, that's very common.
And I took multiple courses, right? And it felt like they were built for 5 years ago. And I had two things going for me. I had the most expensive year of my life to this point, and I was doing this and I had to make enough money to literally live. And so to say that my first year was hard would be an understatement. It was the single hardest year of my life. It was so stressful because, as you know, in land, sometimes you get quick sales. Sometimes you don't. Sometimes you sell in literally 14 days and make 100 grand. Sometimes it takes 7, 10 times longer. And so at the beginning, the hardest thing was sending out mail and saying, is this going to work? Is this going to work? Because I took these courses and I was like, wow, what is the right thing to do? The question was, what's the hardest thing about your first year, right?
Yeah.
And so it was that. It was the inconsistency and the amount of stress and pressure that would literally take your breath away, right? And so I just had to buck up and say, I need to do this for my family so that I can pay for my wedding, so that I can literally live. And that desire, that burning desire in the hardest market ever enabled me to put it together, get it together. And I would say the hardest thing now is this business is difficult. There are moments when you say, hey, I'm going to make $250,000 on this deal, and it falls through. And so the mental game of land is really difficult, I would say. The mental game of any business is really difficult, but when you have 6-figure paydays that maybe are not closing, there are title issues. You know, we had to drop out of a deal that we thought we were going to make a lot of money on because two of the lots we were subdividing it, 2 of the lots didn't perk, and we had to go back and say, hey, this is going to cost us X amount more. We need to reduce the price, and he ended up backing out, right? There's a lot of stuff that in the land business is not all sunshine and rainbows. And so the way that you fight that is the consistency of like every month I'm doing X, Y, Z thing.
Would you say it's still fairly spiky? Just hard to know, like, I'm going to have enough money, or maybe not have enough money, but just like knowing what your income is going to be from quarter to quarter. Is that still kind of just a tough thing? That's what I hear from most land investors, really. So I don't know if that you found a way to get over that or not care about it, or if it's somehow fixed in your business.
Yeah. I would be lying if I didn't say it doesn't spike. It totally spikes. 1 month we might have the month of our dreams, and the next month or next 2 months it'll be no closings, right? And so I think it's very spiky. So, a lot of people will reach out to me on Twitter specifically or in general and say, hey, I'm going to quit my job and get in the land, and I've been reading your Twitter or whatever. And I said, do not do that. Not do that. Build up enough reserves so that you can live and you have enough reserves in your land business. Because if you have to make decisions out of fear and you have to send me out of fear and not know when you're going to get this money back, your business is going to fizz out like a lot of land investors' businesses has fizzed out because they stop being consistent. They say that I have to wait. I'm not sure because they didn't have enough money in the bank in order to push them through.
Yeah, totally agree. It's very well said. Do you have like some kind of a long-term plan for this? Like, where do you envision this business going the next 5 years?
So I think of our business as a conveyor belt of opportunity. And so I could take it anywhere I want. I'm inspired by, have you ever heard of the Yellowstone Club?
I don't think I have. What is that? It is
a private ski golf development community in Big Sky, Montana. And those types of really interesting, cool developments are things that inspire me to approach land with creativity and to approach land with the posture of, hey, I want to really maybe try to see the highest and best views here and get into development. So the vision for my business is to continue to bring opportunities in and convert them into the highest and best use. I think that it's really cool to have this great vision of I'm going to build this awesome community. But at the end of the day, you got to be realistic. Like, we're doing this for money. We are transacting and building a land business so we can get to financial freedom and stability so we can take care of the people in our lives that we love. And so the 5-year vision is more focused around how do I retire my parents, right? How do I help my wife's parents retire? how do I build a future for my son that he looks at his father and he says, I'm proud of what this man did, right? And so wherever that takes me through the opportunity vehicle of land is wherever it takes me. I'd like to get into some entitlement opportunities. I'd like to get into some more creative, cool stuff like the Yellowstone Club. But at this point, it's not really crystallized, right? Because there's so many different directions to go into.
Yeah, totally. We'll have to do another podcast interview once you create Yellowstone Club number 2. That sounds pretty cool. A cool future case study we could do.
Wow. Yeah, right. I'll come back on. I'll come back on. They had some like issues lately. They got sued for like dumping sewage in a local riverbed, and they're like getting sued. So it's like not getting a good reputation right now. But the concept is really beautiful and it's creative.
So do you have any words of advice for new land investors who are just getting started right now in 2024 in this environment? I guess you said maybe, I said a minute ago, don't quit your job without some reserves and that kind of thing. But anything else beyond that?
That's a really important word of advice. There will be people in this space that will tell you, you can build a multiple 6-figure, 7-figure land flipping business if you just quit your job and you just do it. You go all in and go all out. Like the make it happen mentality. That is total bullshit. That is total bullshit. Because yes, you can make $500,000 on a deal. Yes, if you do an entitlement deal, you can make 6 figures, 7 figures. Yes, you can build a consistent income stream that you can change the financial stability of your family in a very short period of time. But you do not want to do it out of a state of fear. So what I would say is, if you're thinking about getting into land, do it. If you're thinking about getting into land, work with someone or be around a community of people that are realistic about what it is. Follow someone that's realistic about exactly what it takes. Because unlike it was a decade ago or even a half a decade ago, it's a competitive business. Is there more opportunity? Is it a blue ocean still relative to wholesaling and house flipping? Absolutely. But is it all sunshine and rainbows? Is it going to be easy? Absolutely not. So have the reserves. Make sure that when you do it, you're fully committed. Make sure that when you do it, you know that if you're starting out, the first 3 months might not look like you expect them to look. But if you commit to it in 6 or 12 months, it will. And that's what matters. But you have to have a long-term perspective, whether you are or when you are getting into land investing.
What are you working on right now that's energizing you?
So the first thing is my business, right? You know, I'm hiring some new people that are really exciting to have into my business, and I recently got another executive assistant, which I think I shared with you, Seth.
Yeah, you did.
An absolute life changer so that I can focus on my zone of genius. So building out people in my business and investing in them and helping them become better professionals is like really cool. When you get to a certain level as a business owner, it becomes more investing in other people in finding their zones of geniuses and encouraging them to reach them than it is like you just being selfish and going out there like a gunslinger. So that's really exciting. Number 2 is we talked about Twitter a lot today. I'm going full on into the Twitter space and social media space. And I will be launching very soon a course called the Landman Accelerator. And the Landman Accelerator is going to be, it's a course that's built off of the fact that I joined this business. I built this business on the way down during the most competitive market using outdated tactics. And so these are all the tactics that I've used in how to scale my business to where it is today. What I would say about that, Seth, is that it's really not for everyone. It's not going to be for everyone. It's not designed to be for everyone. It's not designed for people that want to have a $100,000 a year land business or even a $200,000 a year land business. It's designed for people that are really realistic, that are actually wanting to use this vehicle as a vehicle to set themselves up to where they want to go. So it's not going to be cheap. It's going to be a lot of personal one-on-one attention. And if you want to get, any information about that, you can join my newsletter and I can share that with you or follow me on Twitter. I'm pretty open about discussing that.
Yeah. How do we get on your newsletter?
Well, I can send that to you.
Oh, sure. Okay.
In the notes, I can type.
I'll put that in the show notes for this. This is going to be retipster.com/191 for anybody who's interested in that. Yeah, it's interesting. So when you say it's going to be one-on-one attention or personalized attention, so does it mean like there's coaching wrapped up in this too, or is it just a course? Or
yeah, so it is a very intense course, A to Z, 0 to 190 days in all the channels and all of the documents and everything that I use in my business. It's a plug and play model, and it's updated constantly. It's updated on a daily basis, all the modules and everything in that. And then the coaching, the one-on-one coaching is we're going to get together every single week and coach. How do you look at deals? How do you take your business to the next level? How do you build a business that's scalable? How do you reduce your cash conversion cycles, pitch investors, things like that are intangible, that you're not just going to get on a course and go through the modules and send out the mail and hope for the best. It's how do we take you from 0 to 100 in a really quick amount of time with a lot of accountability and a lot of orientation around getting you to 6 figures. That's the focus of the course, multiple 6 figures within 24 months.
Cool, man. Sounds good. Yeah, it's interesting. Just about everybody I know who has created a land course, something they all have in common was they learned from a really crappy land course that just didn't explain things that well. So it's easy to think, wow, I could do way better than that. And they probably can. So, but there's definitely, I think it's actually a pretty normal thing. A lot of course creators will make it in that point in time, and it just stays in that point in time. So it doesn't get updated or revised or anything. And so it's kind of like this time capsule of things that used to work. So totally, man. I'm excited to see what that's all about, and I hope it's awesome. I'm sure people will love it. Yeah.
One of the things that I wanted to share in this course is there's a document library that this is like the direct mail piece that I'm using. This is like the way that we hire people. Do you want to hire an acquisitions person? This is what we look for when we hire an acquisition person. You want to build out a sales process that you can scale and use KPIs and track in order to make it succeed. Oh, this is how you build out a sustainable, scalable market selection process. All those things that I'm doing in my business or entitlement deals. And as I grow, the library will grow. So it's really going to be a getting into my mind and getting into my world and replicating my business A to Z.
That's awesome, man. If you have time, so whenever I can fit this kind of thing into interviews, I ask 3 closing questions just to learn a little bit more about how the interviewee ticks and how they think and that kind of thing. So question number 1, what are some dreams you have let go of, and what dreams are you still holding on to?
Okay, so one of the dreams, and I mentioned this earlier in the episode, that I let go of was the dream of working for the State Department. That was my raison d'etre, my reason for being for a long period of time. And the reason why is because I was so enchanted by the opportunity to work for the United States government, to travel around the world. I was enthralled by it. And when I got into that environment, this is not to bash the environment that I was in, but it wasn't meritocratic. What I mean by that, it wasn't you put in X amount of effort and you can get an outsized return. It was basically you bid your time, you climb the governmental ladder, and eventually you could become an ambassador. But what I found out is ambassadors really are just people that pay a ton of money into a presidential campaign and get to be the ambassador of Zimbabwe or Norway or whatever it is, Russia, right? Obviously, for the bigger ones, it's a little bit more clout as well. So that was a dream that I let go of. I would say that was not a hard dream to let go of, because after I got into that environment, that it really disenchanted me. And a dream that I'm holding on to is retiring my family. I have a very high level of loyalty to my family. They've given me so much. They sacrificed through so much. They lost everything in 2008. And they're still 20 years later, right? 15 years later, they're still having to fight through that. And it's hard to see your parents that way. So the goal of the land business and everything that I produce, the land course, all these opportunities to create cash flow is really opportunities to help retire my parents, help retire my parents-in-law, and set my son up for an incredible life. So that's like this core orienting North Star. I don't really think much further than that, Seth, because at this point, what matters to me is taking care of the people that I love in that way. And then beyond that, as it expands and I get to the level of I can pay for my family as much as I want, then it'll expand like a concentric circle. I think to a different person or to different people or to a community at large.
No, that's a great one to keep holding on to, man. It's very admirable, and I hope you're able to do it. I'm sure you will be able to pretty soon. So what is one of your best memories?
I met my wife in Spain about 9 years ago. And I was maybe 10 years ago. I don't remember. I met her and we had this fling that was just electric. I met her and I just knew from the moment I met her, she was an incredibly special woman. And we were together in the summer. I was working in Spain and studying in southern Spain. She was as well. And we spent 2 months together. And then I went to college and I didn't talk to her for 2 years. And that was a horrible mistake, right? And then I called her up. I called her up in the spring of my sophomore year of college. And I said, hey, I made a mistake. I bought plane tickets. I'm coming out to see you in Denver, Colorado. And I remember flying in to Denver, Colorado and touching down and walking through Denver International, which I'd never been to. And seeing her 4Runner pull up, and her in her, I haven't seen her in 2 years at that point, a little over 2 years. And I was just like, this is the best decision of my entire life. I was the rest of the ride just sitting there and just so in love. And that's one of my favorite memories.
Thanks for sharing. That's really cool, man. Probably having children is one of the best things people can experience, with which I know you recently had that experience and are going through that now, but also just like meeting someone you love and just going through that falling in love process, and getting to know each other. It's like one of the greatest gifts you'll ever have in life for those who have it. And actually, it pans out well and they make good decisions and all that stuff. But that's a great memory. Thanks for sharing. Last one here. So when was the last time you left your comfort zone and how did you grow?
When I decided to create this course, I said, what value can I add? And it felt like, well, I have a successful business. I've been able to do all these things, but how can someone entrust in me a certain amount of money to help them get to where I am? That was really, really hard because people's money is such a spiritual consideration. Spending money in a course or joining a community, it's such a big thing. And it felt really uncomfortable and unsettling. Like, I'm going to do this because I really want to, because I know I can do this. But it felt like, am I worthy? Am I worthy to do this? You'll have those questions, right? When you do stuff like that, when you go out of your comfort zone, when you say, hey, I want to serve a greater audience, a greater set of people, because I think I can, because I know I can. But you question yourself in all moments. And so that had been uncomfortable, especially when I started out. I'd been getting a bunch of people reaching out to me, and I ended up starting to say, hey, I'm going to do this. I'm going to launch this. I'm going to do this. But that was uncomfortable for me, specifically at the beginning. You don't want to sound salesy, or you don't want to be the person that's out there pitching, because it's really just kind of icky. But if you have something to say and you have something to contribute, it sort of overrides that. But it certainly hasn't been easy in that way.
So aside from X, which I'll link up to your profile in the show notes, again, REtipster.com/191. Is there any other way people could get a hold of you if they want to, or is that the place they should go?
X or Instagram. And I also have a podcast. So I can share all of those in the show notes.
Okay. Awesome, Clay. It's awesome to talk to you. Appreciate your time. Thanks for sharing your wisdom with us. And REtipster.com/191 for the show notes. I'll talk to you next time.